In this video we will learn about demand and supply. Let's first introduce the concept of market and competition. Market is where buyers and sellers interact with each other over an economic transaction. A group of buyers and sellers of a particular goods or services is basically a market. Buyers as a group determine the demand for the product, while sellers as a group determine the supply of the product. Now, the terms supply and demand refer to the behavior of people as they interact with one another in a competitive market. Now we will define competitive markets in the next few slides. Competitive markets are where there are many buyers and many sellers, and none of these two groups have an effect on the market price. In practice, we will rarely see such markets, but there exist some markets which can be classified as competitive markets. For example, market for grains. Take wheat, for example. Individual farmer and the buyer is very small compared to the whole market. So a single buyer and a single seller will not be able to affect the market price. A ton of wheat may be selling at $100. We assume that everyone buys and sells at the given market price. Vegetables markets are the same. Vegetables include, let's say, cabbages. They're quite the same. They're very much similar products. You don't see a luxury cabbage or a poor quality cabbage. There might be some sort of different varieties of cabbages, but they are not kind of classified as poor quality, good quality, and luxury. Yeah? So that's why vegetable markets are the type of markets that are closer to these competitive markets. Now, competitive markets are also called perfectly competitive markets. Now, in perfectly competitive markets, we assume that all goods are exactly the same or homogeneous. When goods are homogeneous, there is no labeling, branding, or advertising. And all the transactions will take place at the market price. The buyers can buy as many as they want, and sellers can sell as many or as much as they want, let's say. And there is a freedom of entry and exit from the market, so sellers can easily enter the market and exit the market without any costs. So these are extreme assumptions of competitive markets. Now let's define the demand. We'll first introduce quantity demanded, which is different from demand. I'll show you the difference in a minute. Quantity demanded is amount of goods and services that buyers are willing and able to purchase. Yeah, they have willingness to purchase, and they are also able to purchase at the same time. It's different from wants. If I were to list my wants, it would be quite a lot. I would like everything, but I cannot afford, so I'm not able to buy them, and I'm not willing to buy all of them. And let's define the law of demand now. We usually assume that all other things are equal, or ceteris paribus. We hold everything else constant, and we change the price. So when the price of a good rises, let's say, or changes, in general it changes, the quantity demanded changes. So in specific examples, let's say when the price of a good increases, let's say, the quantity demanded for that good usually falls. Holding everything else constant, assuming that nothing else changes, we earn the same income. The substitute products, if there are any, do not change prices. There aren't many people coming in and out of let's say, the region that would affect the demand for this product. Yeah, so everything else is constant. We're just tweaking the price a little bit, and then we're seeing the quantity demanded will change. Yeah, and opposite is also true. When the price falls, the quantity demanded rises, holding everything else constant. Now we usually study demand analysis or do demand analysis using a demand schedule and demand graph. Demand schedule, or schedule I should say, shows the relationship between the price of a good and the quantity demanded. So it shows how much quantity of product is demanded given the price, let's say. And the demand curve is just a plot of that demand schedule. And we should always keep in mind that also in the exams and assessments you will be required to say holding everything else constant or holding constant everything else that could influence consumers' demand. Here is an example of demand schedule. So this is Sophia's demand schedule for hand gels. When the price is basically, if this product is free, Sophia would like to buy 16 bottles of hand gels as the price is increasing, the quantity demanded decreasing here. At the highest price of £6 per bottle, Sophia would like to buy 4 bottles of hand gels, holding everything else constant here, yeah? We assume that no other products change their prices that are substitutable with these hand gels or complements or anything that would affect the demand for this product doesn't change basically. And now the schedule is simply plotted here. There's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. So as the price falls on this side, as the price falls, quantity increases. For this pair of price and quantity at this point here, so price is $0, the quantity demanded is 16. When the price increased to $1, and the price is $1, so you trace the quantity along the horizontal line here, right here. This is 14 units, so that point is this pair here. And in this fashion it goes on until the highest price. So $6 correspond to 4 bottles of hand gels. So these points, when connected, form the demand curve. As we said earlier, as the price goes down, quantity demanded increases. As the price goes up, quantity demanded decreases. Yeah, it's the quantity demanded, not the demand itself. Yeah. Now the market demand is the horizontal sum of individual demands. I'll show you what it is in a minute in a schedule. So let's move on. Let's assume that in the market for hand gels, we have only 2 buyers. It's a competitive market. One buyer, as we know, is Sophia. The second one is Diego. So at the given price, we know what Sophia's quantity demanded is. Similarly, Diego's quantity demanded changes as the market price changes. Notice this now. Diego would like to buy twice as fewer hand gels as Sophia. So when the hand gels are free, Diego would like to have 8 hand gels. Prices rise, Diego's demand falls. Quantity demand is also obeying the law of demand. Now, since there are only 2 people in the market, the sum of the 2 quantities make up the market quantity. Yeah, market quantity demanded in the market basically. So 16 plus 8 gives us 24, and in that fashion, this gives us the demand in the market. Now let's graph this schedule. So this schedule is simply the same thing as before from this slide, this column. Yeah, at the given prices, we have quantities demanded. So inverse relationship is preserved here. So these points now are coordinates for the pairs of price and quantity. So at $6, 6 units are demanded here. So that's $6 correspond to 6 units here. Yeah. Now a little bit about the other things that we hold in constant. I introduced this concept a little earlier, but again we'll just recap this point. So the demand curve shows how prices affect quantity demanded. Now notice this, other things being equal, so we're holding everything else constant. Will be the same while price changes. Yeah. So other things could be anything that determine the demand for a product. This could be, let's say, non-price variables such as income, things like the number of people in let's say in a region, tastes and preferences, and changes in this non-price determines shift the demand curve. So this is the sample list of the other things. There could be many of these factors. We just picked up some. Let's look at the number of buyers or the people in a region, let's say. When number of people in a region increases, quantity demanded increase at each price, at given prices. So this leads to the shift of demand curve to the right. Now I'll give you an example in a minute. When the number of buyers decrease in the market, this leads to the quantity demanded at each prices to decrease. And that's a shift of demand to the left. Now suppose that the number of buyers increases. Let's say current price of hand gel is $3 per bottle, and the blue line here is current demand. Suppose the number of buyers increases, then at each price, quantity demanded increases. Let's take this example, this point here, $3. When the product is $3, the original quantity demanded was 15 units. But because number of buyers increased in the market, let's say due to immigration, then there is a shift of this blue curve to the right. So this red line is now the parallel shift of the from the original, I should say, original points to the right. As a result, we have 6 more quantity demanded, yeah, at the given prices. At all given prices, exactly the same thing happens. Yeah, when the price is $6, quantity demanded is 6 units. But because of the higher demand due to immigration, now the quantity demanded is a little higher. So immigration can affect the demand for products. That shift to the right is due to the immigration, let's say. You can think of this in terms of housing market in London. When the immigration increased, the demand for rented homes increases. So there's a shift to the right of this product, the rented homes. Changes in income also affects demand. Changes in income affects demand for goods slightly differently. It depends on the type of good we're looking at. There are normal goods and inferior goods. Normal goods are those goods for which demand increases as the income increases. So as we get richer, we consume more of this good. Yeah, as we get, let's say, when we are a student, our income is low, so we demand less of a certain good that we would like to have more, but because of income, we cannot consume more. But as we graduate and then find jobs, our income rises, obviously, so we start consuming more of such goods. Yeah. So there is a shift of demand to the right when income increases. And there are inferior goods as well, and income affects the demand for these inferior goods differently, holding other things constant. An increase in income leads to a decrease in demand, and there is a shift to the left of this demand curve. Such goods as, let's say, bus rides. Yeah, when your income is low, you would usually ride on a bus or tube. But as you get richer, most likely you will start taking taxi or buy car and drive to work. So your income increasing reduce the demand for bus rides. So there is a shift to the left of demand curve for the bus rides. Yeah. Okay. So moving on. Another example here is sweet corn. As you are a student, you might consume more of sweet corn now for your breakfast. But as you get richer, as you start working and your income rises, you will probably eat less of this product, and you switch to, let's say, sausages and a more expensive breakfast. Now, demand is also affected by the change in the price of related goods. So related goods could be substitutes and complements. An increase in the price of one leads to an increase in the demand for the other good. So two goods are substitutes in that case. Examples are pizza and hamburgers. When the price of pizza increases, demand for hamburgers increase. Now there's a shift of hamburger demand to the right. So substitutes include Pepsi, Coke, laptops, tablets, movie streaming and movie theaters, and many more. Now complements. Complements are products that go together. An increase in the price of one product leads to a decrease in the demand for the other good. Smartphones and apps. If the smartphone prices increase, demand for apps will decrease. So you can think of college tuition and textbooks. As the college tuition increases, it becomes less affordable to study or to get a degree, then obviously demand for textbooks decrease. Printer and cartridges, milk and cookies, electric toothbrush and brush heads, for example. So these goods are usually complements. And changes in tastes affect as well the demand for products. Anything that causes a shift in taste toward the good will increase demand for that good and shifts demand curve to the right. The taste could be against the product as well, yeah? So it causes a shift to the left in that case. I have given an example here about orange juice. Let's take another example. Chief medical officer in the government says, well, drinking 3 cups of ginger tea a day will keep the, let's say, coronavirus away. Yeah, it improves your immune system and you'll not get coronavirus. So what happens is that people start buying ginger drinks or ginger roots to make tea. As a result, the demand curve for ginger will shift to the right in this case. That's actually what happened, if I remember correctly, back in March and April. Shops were always stocking the ginger, and I could always buy anytime when I wanted a ginger, but ginger disappeared from the shelves. My local shop sold a kilogram of ginger for $7.99. Usually sold for $3.99 a kilo. The reason is, given the supply remaining constant, there was a shift of demand to the right. So that's an example about the tastes. Now, expectations about the future also affects people's demand of products. If people expect an increase in income, the current demand increases for products. Let's say you're a student now, and by the end of the third year you may have an offer, let's say, from an accountancy firm, and your wages now, your part-time, 18,000 a year. Now with an accountancy position you may get, let's say, 32,000 a year. That's a massive jump in your income. So you know that in a couple of months time you will start earning higher income. So what do? You start splashing out, yeah, certain things that you usually wanted to buy, but you weren't buying because you expected that your income wouldn't increase, so you wanted to save. But because in a couple of months time you have a higher income, you can afford now these things, yeah. You can start buying now. What if we expect that the prices for certain goods increase, especially in pandemic? That can happen. We could expect that they, as my experience tells me, my local shop may put the price up for ginger if there is another lockdown. So what I do, I would usually go and buy more ginger. So demand for ginger shifts now, demand curve shifts. So by now you should have realized that there is a shift and movement along the curve, the demand curve. So when we say change in demand, it's basically a shift in the demand curve, and this is usually triggered by changes in the non-price determinants of demand, like income, number of buyers, expectations, tastes, and so on, yeah. Now change in the quantity demanded refers to when movements along the demand curve. So demand curve doesn't shift here. It's we're just moving along demand curve up and down as the price changes in this case, yeah. So this happens only when the price changes. So two things: change in demand and change in quantity demanded are different things. Now this is just a summary of what we have covered, and we talked about when price changes, what happens to demand, and when the other factors that are non-price factors change, what happens to demand, yeah. So it's just a summary here. So below this dotted line are the non-price variables or non-price factors that affect demand, while above this line lies the price of the good itself. When price changes, there is a movement along the demand curve. We now turn to the other side of the market and examine the behavior of sellers, the concept of supply. Now the quantity supplied of any good or service is the amount that the sellers are willing and able to sell. This definition is quite similar to the definition of demand. Remember, we highlighted the two words, willingness and ability. So here it's the same idea basically, but it's on the other side of the market. So it's about the sellers in the market. Now if you look at the supply let's say curve, you will see that the price and quantities are positively related. In other words, as the price increases, the quantity supplied increases. Now let's now define the law of supply, or introduce the law of supply, I should say. Law of supply says that, other things equal, when the price of a good rises, the quantity supplied of the good rises too, and vice versa. When the price falls, the quantity supplied falls. Supply schedule is just like demand schedule, is a table showing the prices and quantities supplied for each price. Supply curve then shows, or the graphs, this table on a two-dimensional graph. The idea here is that we hold everything else constant, and then we change the prices and plot the relationship between price and quantities. Let's now look at an example of supply schedule. So this is a supply schedule for hand gels supplied by Boots, the chemists. So notice that as the prices increase, quantity supplied increases here. So it's the opposite of the demand schedule, where when the prices increased, quantity demanded decreased. So supply schedule basically obeys the law of supply, which states that when prices rise, quantity supplied increase. So let's move on to the graphical illustration of supply schedule. This is the graph of this schedule basically. So each point has a coordinate taken from this table. So when the price is $0, no supplier is willing to or able to supply, so 0. So that point is point 0 here. So moving on, so that's when the price is $1, the quantity supplied is 3. So when the price is $1, quantity supplied is 3. So this point is the combination of these two values here, so on and so forth. So if we connect these points, we will now get a positively sloped straight line basically. So this is a supply line or supply curve. Now the market supply is the sum of the supplies of all sellers. Each individual supplier's quantities are added together, gives us a market supply. So let's look at this in an example here. So this is the market supply for hand gels, and we assume that this time the market has two sellers only, Boots and Superdrug, and the quantity supplied by these two retailers at each price is given here, and if you sum them, that gives us the market supply, just like in the demand case. So this is the quantities supplied in the market at each price here. Now here is the market supply and market price. Now notice this, as the prices rise, holding everything else constant, our quantity supplied increases. So we assume that the factors that shift supply curve are constant, they don't change. So if that's the case, then when we increase the price, quantity supplied increases. When the prices change, there is a movement along the supply curve here. Yeah? Just like in demand case, there are supply shifters. So these factors are usually other things. These things are non-price factors, and remember, price changes induce a movement along the supply curve, but when it comes to non-price changes or non-price factors changing, the supply curve shifts in and outwards, yeah, inwards or outwards, or it's the left shift or the right shift, yeah. So we will look at an example in a minute. So these other things are usually non-price determinants. Supply shifters, this is a few examples. These are actually the main examples and important ones. Input prices, so changes in the input prices usually affect the supply. Technology, efficient technology induces more production usually. Number of sellers, depending on increase or decrease in number of sellers, there is also shift in and out, and also expectations about the future. So let's give examples for each one. Let's look at the first point, that is the input prices. Now, as you know, production of goods require inputs. This could include labor, and labor gets paid wages, and these wages are production costs, or price of raw materials, or the rent for the, let's say, for the manufacturing unit, factory, let's say, or rent of the space for the warehouse. So these are input prices. If these prices change, the supply curve shifts to the left or right. So for example, if there is a fall in input prices, usually we expect this product to be more profitable to produce, so the suppliers start producing more. That means at each price there is a more supply of this product. So here's an example that is illustrated. At each price, the blue supply line, which was original, shifts to the left, or to the right in this case, so that gives us a new supply curve here. So because this product became more profitable to make, suppliers started making more of this, and they could sell for at the given price more of that product. Yeah, in this case, shift is by 5 units. Yeah, so at $3 originally, these sellers were selling 15 units, but now because of the, let's say, input price reduction, they are now at this given price willing to produce more and supply more. So 5 more here in this case. So the idea should be clear now. So non-price factors usually shift the supply curve rather than inducing a movement along the curve. So let's look at the other examples here. Technology. Generally, technology affects all products. New technology, let's say, of producing hand gels, yeah, might make it more cheaper, let's say, yeah, and more profitable. In that case, that improvement or application of this new technology may induce more production. Yeah, more retailers are willing to supply at the given prices more of this product. So, moving on, here's another example with graphs. So, a number of sellers also affects the supply curve. Remember, if production is profitable, or then more suppliers may come into the market. As the number of sellers increase, then there will be at the given price more supply of this good and service. Yeah, so that's a shift to the right. However, if the number of sellers decrease, then in that case, obviously supply disappears from the market now, and as a result, there's a shift to the left. So less is supplied at the given price here because of this shift to the left in this case. Yeah, so you might think of, let's say, market for hand gels, and only Boots and Superdrug supplies it right now. Let's say Boots goes into administration, and what happens is that they stop trading, and only Superdrug remains supplying the hand gels. A large quantity or supply of hand gel will disappear from the market. Supply decreases as a result. So that's shown here as a leftward shift of the supply curve. Okay, so let's move on. Expectations, just like in the case of demand, affect the supply as well. Let's assume that there is war event in the Middle East. Now what happens in this case is that the Middle East is known for its oil resources, and many of these countries supply oil to the international markets. In that case, if that sort of event has a negative effect on the oil market, and usually that's what happens, if the war happens, usually that affects the oil price negatively, then there's an expectation that the prices will increase, because when there is war, let's say, there's always expectation of supply shrinking soon. So there will be a shortage of oil, let's say, in a month's time. Now, knowing this, let's say American suppliers might decide to stop selling the oil or supplying the oil, because they know that in a month's time the price will go from $80 per barrel to, let's say, $100 per barrel. So rather than selling now for $80 per barrel, they also reduce the supply, or maybe completely stop selling. Yeah, in that case, supply curve shifts to the left. Supply of oil curve shifts to the left. Yeah. So it's depending on the expectations and then how do you call it, sentiment of suppliers, this decision to supply or not affects. Okay, so another example about the supply expectations is that if you expect that let's say you are a house owner and you want to sell, and if you expect that COVID will affect negatively the housing market and affects the prices negatively, in that case you want to sell your house right now, put it in the market right now, so that you can sell it at the higher price before the prices start going down. So like you, many other house owners might think, yeah, rationally, so they would start putting their houses in the market. This then increases supply of houses in the market. Yeah, so there is a shift to the right. So that's another example for you about the expectations. So let's differentiate between the shifts and movements along the supply curve. Now, when we say change in the supply, we usually refer to shifts. Yeah, shift in the supply curve rather than a movement along the supply curve. It's change in supply. Yeah, this happens due to the non-price determinants of supply changes, like the technology, cost, expectations, and number of sellers in the market. Now, change in the quantity supplies happens due to the change in the price. So this is just a movement along the supply curve. All right, so here we now have the summary of the important points. So price changes mean quantity supply changing, so that's a movement along the curve. But when non-price factors change, like input prices, technology, expectations, number of sellers, then there is a shift in the supply curve. So we refer to them as change in supply. Let's now put together demand and supply curves and analyze market equilibrium. Now, market equilibrium is when supply and demand matches. In other words, I should use the correct wording here, quantity supplied and quantity demanded matches, and buyers and sellers are satisfied at equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. Now, in general, in equilibrium values, in fact, all forces are in equilibrium in the market. So everyone is satisfied, basically, buyers and sellers. So that's the equilibrium point here. As you can see, our supply and demand curve crosses right here at the price of $3 and 15 quantities. So quantity supplied and quantity demanded is the same at this point. In this slide, you see the supply and demand diagram, and then the supply and demand schedule. As we said earlier, the equilibrium price and quantities are given on the graph, and they are also shown here in the table. So two ways of determining the equilibrium point here. Now, what happens if the market price is not under equilibrium price? So here you see an example of a market price higher than the equilibrium price. So at the given market price, only 9 handgels are demanded, while the suppliers are willing to supply more quantities at that price. So 25 handgels are supplied. So that creates in the market a surplus quantity. Yeah, so the surplus is the difference between 25 and 9, and that's 16 handgels. Right, so what's the outcome then? What happens? Now, when there is a surplus, there is always a downward pressure on the prices. There's plenty of supply available, but less demand. So this is not a good outcome for the suppliers. They need to store these handgels. They need to keep these handgels sellable condition, and they usually have expiries. Yeah, expiry dates. So which means then there's a downward pressure on the prices. People are not buying them. The suppliers, in order to sell them as quickly as they can, start reducing the prices. So as the prices reduce, more people will become willing to purchase them as handgels. So at lower prices, more people come to the market and buy. So the price reduction goes up to the point where we reach the equilibrium point. Yeah, up to the point of equilibrium. So that's when the price settles at $3 and the quantity will be 15 units. Yeah, so that's the dynamics in the market when the market price is higher than the equilibrium price. What if the price is well below the equilibrium price? Yeah, the market price is well below the equilibrium price. So here's an example. When the price is in the market is $1, the quantity supplied is quite low. Naturally, it's 5 units. Only 5 units can be supplied, because at low prices suppliers do not make that much profit, so they may not be willing and able to produce more. But the demand, as you can see, is quite high. A lot of people would buy, and in fact people would buy more than 1 or 2 quantities each. Yeah, so that creates this shortage in the market. So when there's shortage, there is an upward pressure on the price. So because of shortage, suppliers start raising the prices. As the prices rise, only those who are willing and able to buy at higher prices start buying. So fewer quantities are sold. So as the prices rise, quantities sold will decline, will settle at the point where quantity supplied is equal to quantity demanded. So that's again back to the $3 and 15 quantities of handgels. Let's now analyze change in the equilibrium price and quantity in the market. Usually equilibrium price and quantity change when there is a shift in demand, supply, or both of them. So in this analysis, we will consider various events that shift supply or demand, or both. And the important thing here to note is that we need to determine how the events affect the curves. We need to determine whether the event shifts the demand or supply curve. That's the first step. Then we should decide whether the shifts in the curves are to the right or to the left, and eventually we can compare the new equilibrium with the old equilibrium. So let's have a quick look at these cases. So we will start the example with a market for antibacterial wipes. Our market at the moment is in equilibrium at the point P1 and Q1, and we have the y-axis showing us the price of wipes, and then on the horizontal axis we have the quantities demanded. Yeah, so market equilibrium is at this point where P1 and Q1 shown. Yeah, so let's move on. We know that the antibacterial wipes and hand gels are substitute goods. So if the price of one of these products increase, the demand for the other product increases. So let's start with event A here. So there is an increase in the price of hand gels, and remember the from the previous slides, the blue. So this blue diagram shows us the equilibrium in the market for antibacterial wipes. So when there is an increase in the price of hand gels, there will be more demand for antibacterial wipes. So that results in the shift of demand 1 to demand 2. Now we have a higher equilibrium price and a higher quantity for the antibacterial wipes. So at the original P1, the equilibrium quantity was Q1. However, after the entrance of many people into the market to buy antibacterial wipes, the shift of demand occurs. Yeah, so at the given price now there is a higher demand. Yeah, at the given price there is higher demand. That's QD here. That creates a shortage in the market. You see, so QD is greater than Q1, so there is a shortage in the market. That means suppliers increase the prices. So they increase the prices up to the point there is an equilibrium in the market. So a new equilibrium is a point where buyers and sellers quantities match and their price preferences also match. So everyone will be satisfied at this point. So that will be our new equilibrium point as a result. So that's event A. Now let's look at another event. Event B. Now event B is about the technology. New technology, let's say, is invented that helps the producers to reduce the cost of producing antibacterial wipes. Because of this technological innovation, there is a shift of supply curve to the right now. So at the given prices now, more is supplied because it's cheaper to produce. So more will be produced and more will be supplied. So there will be a surplus. The coordinates are missing. There should be a QS here that corresponds to this P1 price on the new supply line. As you can see, QS is greater than the original quantity. That creates this surplus in the market. With the surplus remaining in the market, suppliers start reducing the price. So this is a movement along the demand curve up to a point where we have the equilibrium. So where we have S2 crossing D1. So that's the equilibrium point, right? So let's move on. And now let's assume that these two events happen at the same time. What happens to the equilibrium now? So assume that the price of hand gels rises, and at the same time a new technology reduces the production of antibacterial wipes. So the first event obviously shifts the demand curve to the right. Second event shifts the supply curve to the right, and we will have a new higher quantity, equilibrium quantity, and then higher price. However, price change is ambiguous usually. We certainly know that there will be new higher quantity because supply and demand are shifting to the right. Yeah, both of them are shifting to the right. Depending on how much the demand shifted or supply shifted to the right, direction of prices might change. So in this case, demand is shifting by a higher amount compared to supply. As a result, the price is rising. But let's look at the second case here. In the second case, it's the same event basically. Price of hand gel increases, demand shifts to the right, new technology reduces the production cost, then the supply shifts to the right. But notice that this time supply shifts by a higher amount compared to demand. Yeah, more supply means lower prices. So price now is declining, so it's going down here while the quantity is increasing. Yeah, quantity, equilibrium quantity always increases when there is a rightward shift in these two curves. But the effect on the price of these shifts usually is ambiguous. So the effect on the price depends on which one of these two shifts by a higher amount, whether supply or demand. Yeah, if demand shifts by a higher amount relative to supply, then we will see a new higher equilibrium price. However, if the supply shifts by a higher amount relative to demand, then there will be a new lower equilibrium price.